Hello and welcome along to Leaders Live, back on the air, live and direct from IMG Studios here in London.
On the show today, inside a tumultuous Premiership Rugby season, Chief Executive Simon Massie-Taylor will be here shortly to talk losing clubs, the role of CVC and the transformation plan that he hopes will secure the league's future.
And later, senior executives from two of the world's leading brands will be with us to examine the current state of the sponsorship market. Melissa DeHame, Director of Sports Marketing in North America for Pepsi, and Lizelle Sitali, Director of Football and Music Partnerships at Expedia, will be on Leaders Live later.
There's also our regular EDI Spotlight from the Leaders Meet Diversity series. Plenty of ways to get in touch too, so do not be shy. We're live on Twitter and LinkedIn right now. You can comment there, plus you can get in touch with us directly at James Emmett and at David Kushner.
I'm on LinkedIn right here, actually, Dave.
Very nice.
Yes. But first, it is a World Cup year in rugby union, and the Six Nations has served up a series of terrific contests over recent weeks. At a club level, however, here in England, the waters have been somewhat choppier.
Premiership Rugby, the top tier of club rugby in England, has effectively lost two clubs this season, with Worcester Warriors and Wasps both collapsing, prompting understandable talk of crisis. So what next for Premiership Rugby, its remaining clubs, club rugby in general, and CVC, which invested in the league back in 2018? And what does the executive running the whole thing make of it all?
Should we ask him, David?
Let's
We've got him right here. Simon Massie-Taylor, Premiership Rugby CEO. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Simon, you have been in the role for just over a year. Happy anniversary. Happy LinkedIn work anniversary, I think they say. It's a good time for reflection, I think. Looking back with your head teacher's report card out, how are you grading Premiership Rugby, both from an application point of view and a results point of view?
Well, I think on the pitch, front of house, so PE, art, I'd probably give it an A star, really. What we've got is such a fabulous league, so competitive, with some brilliant brands in it and some highly entertaining sport content, which is doing brilliantly as far as viewership and following. I think, I'd add drama as probably an A on that one as well, but clearly the drama...
art and drama, A.
Yeah. So, but the drama's extended off the pitch as well, clearly. So if you extend the analogy, I think the economics score is pretty low, let's be honest, of what we face post-COVID, and that needs addressing, clearly. But the thing that's probably surprised me and the thing that's developed the most is politics. I'd probably give politics a B.
Oh, really? Is that good? That's
I think
that's
good. I think if you look at sport generally, but certainly sports that are as fragmented as rugby is, let's be honest with the way it's constructed, I think that stifled growth and it has affected governance in days gone by. But I think there's been a lot of progress recently, and some of that's been galvanised through COVID, but then also through what we've had to deal with at a club level over the last few months. And so that's a relatively positive mark there.
With all that in mind, and extending this analogy to a torturous level, you're going into parents' evening. You need to deliver the message to the troops. What are they going to say to the parents? What's the single biggest issue that you want to get across?
Well, the single biggest issue in the game generally, and I think it crosses across sport more generally, and in other rugby competitions around the world, is financial sustainability, long-term financial sustainability. We've got an ecosystem that generates a huge amount of money globally if you combine everything together, and I think we need to work together with stakeholders to make that a sustainable long-term sport.
Yeah.
We talked about the two clubs that have unfortunately been lost this season, Worcester Warriors and Wasps, and always extremely emotive when something like that happens. And also I know that in each individual case, tremendously complicated and different scenarios happening. At a sort of top level, what needs to be done to avoid this sort of thing happening again?
Yeah, so there's four main things that we're focusing on. And I think, frankly, irrespective of Wasps and Worcester falling to the fate that they did this year, it's essential for the league going forward. The first thing's around financial control, financial monitoring. we've operated a system that's been quite devolved when it comes to the responsibility of clubs and the way things have been governed. And so we've set up a financial monitoring panel. We're setting up one, and we've appointed someone to independently chair that, Sir Nigel Boardman, who you would have seen announced in the last couple of weeks. And with that, really, this control, this financial monitoring panel needs to oversee not only club finances, but put some regulation in place to instill better discipline and better controls around this type of thing happening. And so we're in the process of setting that thing up, putting the regulations in place. It will be a Marshall Plan, because I think we're at quite a brittle stage at the moment. So this is a long-term piece to build up to financial fitness, but it's absolutely essential. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to stabilise the foundations generally. Now, some of that is going to be addressed with our relationship with the RFU. So that's enshrined in what is called the Professional Game Agreement at the moment. That provides funding, necessary funding into the clubs for academies and everything else, but is super important to give long-term stability to the club environment. So that's another piece. I think the third point is around governance and just generally getting ourselves into evolving our governance, evolving our decision making, and really what these three things are pointing towards, alongside a strong growth plan, is the fact that we need new investors to come into clubs long term. And so we need to send all the signals out there that are encouraging and attractive to new investors. And so financial control, stability, good central strong governance, which we've done through setting up a sporting commission, an independent sporting commission. So thus devolving a lot of decision making to an independent group, freeing up conflict, making things more nimble. The idea is then that we can attract future investment and help with the stability.
What's it like being you in the eye of the storm?
It's a good question, just leave it at that.
What's it like being you, Simon? But particularly over the past few months, being in the eye of this storm and the front man, the leader of the league. What's the sort of impact been for you personally?
Well, I knew what I was getting myself in for. I worked at the RFU for 5 years beforehand, and knew the challenge, but equally knew the opportunity. So I came into it with eyes open and immediately put in a strategy and a plan for growth and stability within the league. But then, and it was good that happened prior to Ross and Worcester, because then my whole attention was diverted really towards the crisis that was enveloping. And it happened very quickly because actually both clubs were reliant on external debt, and the markets were getting worse and worse for trying to get that. So all these things unfolded pretty quickly. But in turn, it became a catalyst for ourselves to get some of this governance change, to get the financial monitoring in place. Some of the stuff that probably would have happened in a few years' time, but has been brought forward around it. So that's the only real positive around it. But I think that the challenging bit has been the emotional side of it, both personally, because you take these things very personally. It's a sport you love and you're working in it. But when you're having to deal firsthand with players, with fans, with people that work in these clubs, it's brutal. And the unfortunate reality is that businesses have gone bust and do go bust, especially during such difficult economic times. But when it's sport, it's so different because there's an emotional attachment, and we all work in sport, and it's more than a job, isn't it? And so I think that's been the most challenging piece, is the human element. Mm.
Sorting out governance structures of the clubs themselves, key to the kind of long-term stability and investment viability of the league, but also, a key plank of any kind of sports properties viability is the media rights sort of strategy and direction. How satisfied are you at present with Premiership Rugby's kind of TV broadcast mix?
So we've got a really strong long-term partnership with BT Sport, who obviously announced a couple of weeks ago that they're going to rebrand as TNT as of next season for us. And they have built the product up to be a world-renowned rugby broadcast platform. They really have built a good quality product there. And with it brought a really loyal fan base with them. And we're continuing to see growth there. And so last season was our best season ever. I think it was sort of 20% up on anything in the previous cycle. And we're continuing to grow now on that side of things. But what was important to us coming into last year was distribution, and we've got a whole strategy around being accessible for all. And so the partnership with ITV to give 7 live games, including the final, was an important addition to that. Plus the fact that they're doing highlight shows as well. And we're getting to the stage now where we're getting around 1 million people tuning into this at peak, and we hope for well beyond that when we broadcast the final later on this year. So ITV have been a great partner in that, just to appeal to a wider audience. And it's definitely been complementary to rather than cannibalising the BT audience. And I think that's a real positive. And then the third element to it, which was important, was making all games available. So we launched pretty quickly, actually, back in March last year, PRTV, our streaming platform. So that was for all games that weren't picked by BT. And that's been really popular. It's been a fan favourite because for people that have season tickets and want to go and watch an away game and it's not on BT, and but more broadly, people have picked up on it. And so how that evolves and pivots going into the next cycle is a topic of conversation at the moment. But I guess stage one of achieving it being accessible for all and getting that distribution out there and having the right partners is great. Yeah. I'd say the other thing about ITV that's great, and is part of our wider strategy, is it's aligned with the international game. And that is we're in the middle of the Six Nations at the moment, 7, 8, sometimes more people, million people watching international rugby, and that's just a funnel into club rugby. And ITV have been great in just signposting audiences into the club game from the international window, which is exactly what we wanted.
And I guess with PRTV, it's a useful sort of leverage point in future kind of media rights negotiations as well, to have your own OTT. The fundamental question, I suppose, for any rights holder going to market with their media rights is sort of reach versus revenue, right? That's what everyone at some level is asking themselves. Do you think you've got the right mix there? And what would you like more? Presumably you want more of both, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think we have got a good balance for where we are at the moment, because you've got that strong core, as I say, with BT and that mass distribution of ITV. And I think you also need, when you think about club rugby, it's not just the Gallagher Premiership. You also need to think of EPCR competitions, so the Heineken Champions Cup and the Challenge Cup there, where again we've got this balance of distribution between ITV and BT. And so, collectively, we've got 14 live games now on ITV, plus the huge volume that BT produce, and that's really positive.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I would imagine you spend quite a lot of your time thinking about and occupied with is the relationship with CVC, which, as we touched on at the start of the show, is actually quite a long-standing one now, given some of the more recent investments that we've seen. December 2018, CVC invested in Premiership Rugby. It's done a lot more besides in rugby since then. Tell us a little bit about how it works in practice, that relationship, what you think CVC has achieved so far and done for the league, and maybe a little bit about how far you believe we are on the private equity and rugby journey.
Yeah, there's a few misconceptions, I think, around CVC's role, certainly within rugby or Premiership and more broadly within sport, because they're an investor principally. And so they invest in opportunities. They have obviously a clear commercial focus, and they employ management teams to put the strategy in place and execute on it. When they invested in Premiership Rugby back in 2019, it was a really important intervention around commercial focus, and so and also trying to centralise and have more direction from the Premiership to bring the clubs along to a collective strategy. And so we've definitely evolved on that, and there's investment there to invest in marketing and the various things that we need to move things forward. So that's been a real positive. Clearly, that when their investment came in, it came in pre-COVID, and a number of clubs had deployed a lot of that already, in whether it was training facilities or stadia or paying off debt or various other things. But the reality was that a lot of what was left over had to fuel surviving COVID, and frankly, if that funding wasn't there, plus the government funding that was there as well, a lot more clubs would have gone bust a lot quicker. Now we come out of it now, and what's been a challenging period, and since then CVC have made other investments in rugby, and they principally, or one of the main reasons of investing in it was seeing the fragmentation that existed within our world, and so it's definitely brought us closer together with URC, with Six Nations, who are the other rugby investments. But also, it's just brought things closer with other stakeholders, the unions, the RFU, for example, who are all part of this mix. And the key to growth is alignment of narrative, alignment of the way we deal with things commercially. And we're now at a stage now where, so for example, we share offices with URC and Six Nations, but it's not this this exclusive CVC club that's being formed here. We're very much trying to collaborate with as many rugby rights holders as possible on various different projects. And that's starting to gain momentum now, and that's really positive. And the whole thing's integrated, right? So World Rugby had a fantastic conference last week around the state of the game, and it was all the stakeholders in the room, and there's a lot of collective challenges, and I think more than ever, people are converging on very similar strategies and trying to share as much as possible. So it's positive.
How much of a challenge has it been? And we've seen the WTA have just announced an investment this week.
From CVC.
From CVC. How challenging is it to almost manage fan expectations when we read about an investment like this? It sounds like a lot of money. It is a lot of money. It's being invested and used, as you've pointed out, in all sorts of different ways. But there does seem to be an expectation that an investment will have really obvious, visible results, and sometimes the reality is that's just not the case. How have you found that element of the sort of relationship with CVC and how fans react to it?
Yeah, I think there's an impatience that suddenly it's going to solve all problems, right? And I think the reality is that they are strategic investors who are looking into the long term, and that's really important. Okay, so this isn't a quick fix for them. They need to build up value, need to build up equity. This needs to exist well beyond the time at which they're investing in these properties. So that massively helps in long-term decision-making, the right decision-making. But clearly there's an impatience probably from everyone within, whether it's fans or whether it's club owners or anything else around things happening, immediately. And that's just not the reality. And I think especially post-COVID, when you look at the general balance sheet of things, there's a lot of things that are going to be very tough and very difficult to execute. But there's a long-term around it.
So in this shared office that you have with URC...
You're intrigued by this,
I'm intrigued by this, yeah. I'm just wondering how the sort of office dynamics work, is there squabbling over boardroom bookings and that kind of thing? Who comes out on top?
We've probably got the most people in there, okay. But it's all
strength in numbers.
It's all open plan. There's no. I think there was a perception that there was a huge amount of confidentiality between all the different parties, and probably an element of sort of protectiveness around what people did. And I think we sort of had the opposite, really. I think it's been open and very collaborative. And also, just frankly, when you're working on a lot of things behind the scenes, whether it's just using the same platforms for marketing and everything else, just being in reaching distance of those folks rather than having to jump on calls or go to meetings, it's just been quite fluid, actually. So a real positive.
You mentioned that you spent 5 years at the RFU England Rugby before taking the role at Premiership Rugby, so you knew what you were getting yourself in for. I also note that you gave Premiership Rugby a B for politics, right? Which would indicate to me that you came from quite a political environment where, maybe there were frustrations there. Bearing in mind, what you came from and what you jumped into, what has sort of delighted you or surprised you or frustrated you the most about that transition?
Well, I think it existed for quite a bit beforehand and has continued to evolve, but that alignment, that sharing of goals, I think that trust that is and has been built up amongst certainly those organisations over the last few years is really positive. So I walk into an environment where people are willing to collaborate, and that also happens within Premiership Rugby as well, and the clubs are really well aligned both to our plan and just generally where we're trying to head. So there's a real sense of collaboration. So that's a real positive. I think the sort of the main difference for me is probably just out of my role. I came from a very sort of commercially focused role back at the RFU, and I've had to deal with a lot of other things in coming into this new role, which has actually been quite a good distraction from me probably meddling too much on the
money side.
On other people's areas. So it's been a massive learning curve for me over the last few months, but positive.
What is the thing that keeps you up at night? It's the sleep question, Simon. How are you sleeping? And if you're not, why not?
Just kids. Apart from that,
you got
sleep,
some, right?
I sleep well. Yeah. One's regularly in the bed. Yeah.
Tell us then about. Give us a sort of snapshot of a day in the life of a CEO of a big league. What are some of the key meetings that you have? How many stakeholders are you trying to engage? In any sort of 8, 10, 12-hour period.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. And so therefore it's about efficiency and efficiency of communication and getting alignment. But, when you've got 11 clubs, that's 11 chief execs, that's 11 chairmen or owners. You've clearly got the RFU, you've got the RPA, the Players Association, who are super important in all of this. You now have DCMS, so you have government as a key stakeholder in this whole piece. And so the list goes on with that bit, and also clearly all the other people that you're trying to collaborate with and align with, partners, broadcasters, and so there's a long list of there, and so communications is really key in alignment. And then you've got a business to run and strategy to execute, and the good news is we've got a really good team at Premier Rugby who are doing that, and actually. Using the Wasps and Worcester period as an example, because we had a plan in place and because we had a good team in place, that business kept on moving whilst a lot of the executive were quite distracted with dealing with quite big matters that were going on.
I'm really trying to reduce the number of meetings I'm in, Simon. Have you got a tip?
Just say no.
Well, sometimes it's tricky to say no.
I think a lot of people are doing 2 or 3 meetings at the same time, aren't they, on their phones or otherwise.
Is that what you do? You've got your phone open?
No, I'm totally respectful for who's in the room.
Present.
Sorry, just need to clear my throat. Excuse me.
No, go for it. Let me ask you a question while you do that.
I've got a question.
Go on, then.
I'm going to do it in a croaky way, if that's okay. You talk about the RPA, the Players Association. We had Dylan Hartley at an event that we ran in Abu Dhabi last week. He's out there in the UAE now. And he was talking on stage, expressing his frustration as a former player about the RFU have introduced that new rule change about tackle heights. And he was expressing his frustration that he felt like players weren't consulted or weren't consulted enough in that process. I know, obviously, Premiership Rugby isn't involved in the rule setting like that, but what would you say to Dylan Hartley about the way that Premiership Rugby consults players?
Yeah, I think, again, to school grading, I think we've probably haven't done enough on that historically. Now, there are forums with which there's official engagement, and so there's a professional game board, which the RFU, the RPA and Premiership Rugby sit on. So there's player representation in a sort of formal governance capacity. But I don't think it's a forfeit for direct engagement with the players, and there's two reasons for that. One of them is generally from a feedback loop and communication point of view. People need to really understand where we're heading, and we need to be accountable to a wider group around what we're doing. So, for example, over the next few months, I'm planning club visits across all the player groups now, because it's quite an important time to be engaging the players generally. But I think there's another piece in here which comes back the other way, is they're absolutely key to a lot of our growth plans. Every sport is reliant on the growth and the profile of individual players who are there as essentially the prime promoters of a sport. So I think our relationship needs to improve with the players on that side of things, because they're a key marketing asset, and we need them to shout from the rooftops about the league. Mm-hmm. So I think that relationship needs to improve. So we're going through the professional game piece at the moment. We're consulting the RPA on that. But also, actually, when I talked about the Sporting Commission within our own governance, one of the independent spots there will be for a recently retired player. So we actually get a player's voice at the table within our own decision making.
Mm-hmm. Final question. I'm just going to throw it in there. You've had no prep for this. Who's your favourite rugby player of all time?
Childhood hero Will Carling, probably. One of my first jobs at the RFU was to tell him that we weren't renewing his hospitality contract. So that took me about 3 goes to get that.
They do say never meet your heroes.
Yeah. I mean, I think as far as if you look at the Premiership, there's a lot of unsung heroes who perhaps haven't had international caps but have been absolute stalwarts for the game. But if you look at the existing crop of players, people like Danny Kerr, for example, who's just broken a club record. Who's been a fabulous ambassador for the international game, but then also has done an amazing job for Harlequins. It's those folks that really are the heroes, certainly from the Premiership's point of view.
So I'm taking Will Carling and then Danny Kerr.
I'll give Danny Kerr.
Okay. Simon Massie-Taylor, thank you very much indeed. That's all we've got time for, I'm afraid. Our thanks to Simon. This is Leaders Live, where we will continue very shortly.
I'm invincible, just off principle, irresistible, ever since the ball showed his face around here, I've been head down grinding. The only time I look up is when I must remind him, I'm on top, you can see the rise, never will I stop, never lose horizon, see it by force, open up your eyes while the others disguise, I'ma make them realize. You have it too, you have it too, I'm invincible, just on principle, irresistible, ever since the ball showed his face around here, I've been head down grinding. The only time I look up is when I must remind him, I'm on top, you can see the rise, never will I stop, never lose horizon, see it by force, open up your eyes while the others disguise, I'ma make them realize.
So here are the key details for Force. It's our new event experience where sport meets entertainment, lifestyle and culture. Stand by for a great and memorable couple of days in New York this May. Tuesday the 23rd, Wednesday the 24th. We'll have the best of the sports industry, plus key people from the worlds of music, fashion, TV, movies and gaming, plus a host of only the most important brands and agencies. For more, visit 4-se.com or check us out on Instagram, where we're doing some very fine business indeed. That is Force. Now it's time for our regular EDI Spotlight with Giovanna Dega and Jade Amings.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight on EDI, where we shine a light on some key movements in the equity, diversity and inclusion space. We'd like to start by wishing everyone a belated Happy International Women's Day. To mark the day, leaders are holding a pop-up event at Meta offices on Thursday the 30th of March. Please get in touch if you'd like to join us and find out more about how you can embrace equity.
And now, for the headlines. FIFA have announced the appointment of Brazilian supermodel Adriana Lima as the official fan ambassador ahead of the Women's World Cup. While Lima's fans celebrated the announcement, there was some backlash from sports fans who questioned why celebrities like this, who have had no official involvement in the sport beforehand, are often given the opportunity to be the face of the sport and sportswear over female athletes. We spoke about pay disparity in the sport last month, and social media users have also questioned how much this ambassador role may be worth financially and how that compares to the players' salaries.
The minor league baseball club, the Indianapolis Indians, have announced that they will keep their team nickname. This is in spite of other American sports teams such as the NFL's Washington franchise and the MLB's Cleveland team changing their nicknames in response to rising conversation around racial injustice and reassessment of America's historical treatment of the indigenous population. The Indianapolis Indians have, however, partnered with a local tribe, the Miami Nation of Indians in Indiana. In a press release, the team stated that their partnership will include a land acknowledgement, recognition of Miami veterans during Native American Heritage Night at Victory Field, support of Miami Scholarship Program, and fan educational opportunities. From the tribe's side, Chief Brian Buchanan said, "When the history of Indiana is studied, the major influence of Native American people is seen in the names of Indiana cities, state parks, rivers, food, celebrations, and other cultural points of interest. We have encouraged the team to remain the Indianapolis Indians."
The Rugby Football Union have announced a new maternity policy that will catalyse promising changes in motherhood in the sport. The policy includes 26 weeks of leave on full pay for England players, including maternity, pregnant parent and adoption leave. Pregnant players will also have the opportunity to perform other roles within the sport during their pregnancy. Prior to going on leave, a safety assessment will be carried out to determine what roles are safest for mother and their unborn child. Red Roses lock Abby Ward, who recently announced she's expecting her first child, has said, "I'm confident the policy will help normalise motherhood in sport and give players the best possible chance of returning to play should they want to do so in a secure and safe way."
Czech Republic international Jakub Jankto has come out as a member of the LGBTQ+ community. The footballer, who plays for Sparta Prague on loan from Katavi, said in a video on Twitter, "I want to live my life in freedom, without fears, without prejudice, without violence, but with love. I'm homosexual and no longer want to hide myself." He follows in the footsteps of other footballers such as Jake Daniels, but where others have either already retired or are at the beginning of their career, his coming out comes at seemingly the height of his visibility. For that reason, his declaration will surely achieve what he explicitly stated the purpose to be: to encourage others to do the same.
And now it's time for our main story. During the Genesis Invitational in Los Angeles, Tiger Woods jokingly handed his opponent, Justin Thomas, a tampon after outdriving him in the 9th hole. The incident sparked a fair amount of discussion and controversy. Fittingly, for Women's History Month, we want to break this down a little more within the context of period shame.
If you're wondering why this particular incident caused controversy, it's because it was said to reinforce the idea that women are physically inferior and that female physiology is related to weakness or to poor performance. Referring to athletes as running or throwing like a girl has long been derogatory until recent years' attempts to reclaim it. While Woods has apologised, stating that it was a joke between friends not intended to cause offence, it was not only on a public platform, but also appeared to have been premeditated, as some questioned whether Woods would have otherwise been carrying a tampon on his person.
But if you're widening up the conversation beyond just this on one occurrence, sport has in many ways lacked inclusive consideration of women's cycles. When running a marathon, you rarely see period products being provided as you do other essentials. An international rugby player, Eleanor Snowsill, has said access to bins, toilets and toilet paper during her career was potluck. Last year, Wimbledon announced that they would relax their all-white dress code following discussions around period concerns, and multiple women's GAA teams in Ireland announced that they would do the same last month. But all-white kits and dress codes do continue to be present across other sports that have female participants.
The changes that have already been made are the result of women being vocal and open to talking about issues that come with their cycle. However, this can be tricky as the topic of menstruation has long been considered taboo. On the Leaders in EDI podcast towards the end of 2022, we spoke about the #SayPeriod campaign, which aimed to combat the stigma around periods by normalising language around the topic, following athletes such as Dina Asher-Smith calling for more research and conversations around periods in sport. The Well HQ, who launched the campaign, found that 64% of school-age girls will stop playing sport by their mid-teens because of period pain and shame, which aligns with an Adidas survey in 2021 that found that 1 in 4 girls dropped out of sport in adolescence, with fear of period leakage being a key reason.
Following the Tigers incident, The Gist and Rethink have announced the launch of another campaign, Tampons for Tiger, which aims to highlight female excellence in sport and dispel the myth that women have less ability to perform at a high level than men. So, what more can we do to help dispel this myth and rid the industry of period shame?
Well, across every industry, we can all start by saying period, getting rid of euphemisms like aren't, flow, or mouthing the words under our breaths. Periods are something that has happened or will happen to half the population, and there's no shame in talking about it. People who menstruate need to stop hiding tampons in our sleeves when we go to the bathroom, and the people around us need to create an environment where we feel we can do that without being ridiculed. We need to have period products be more accessible and waste bins to be an essential for every toilet cubicle. Specifically in sport, we need individualised training tailored to each female athlete's cycle to help maximise her performance, and we need to be giving them kits that they will feel comfortable in at any stage.
In our performance special report, The Female Lead, last year, we discussed how there are parts of the cycle where performance in certain areas can be enhanced. So while being mindful of the side effects that come with periods, we shouldn't treat them as a weakness. We can reframe cycles as a strength, or at the very least, not something that will hold an athlete back. And we need to invest in research around female physiology and its impact on performance, so that we are helping women to be the best athletes that they can be.
And last of all, we need to celebrate female athletes and their achievements, not just on International Women's Day, not just throughout Women's History Month, but all year round, every year that comes around. If we give these athletes the praise and the visibility that they deserve, we can rebrand the connotation of performing like a girl from one of inferiority to one of excellence.
The marathon continues. Before we throw it back to James and David, let's look ahead to October's Leaders Sports Awards.
It's fabulous. You see such the diversity of sport, the diversity of people, and what are surrounding to do it in.
I'm delighted to welcome over 600 of you to celebrate with us here tonight at the wonderful Natural History Museum.
You know, what I hope to achieve with this award is this will give me a chance to talk more about what we're doing and really use it to inspire more women to get involved in the sports industry.
It shows the magnitude of sport when you get to bring together so many people in such an iconic venue.
What a crowd, 600 people plus, all celebrating the achievements in sport. It's buzzy, it's atmospheric, and yeah, looking forward to next year.
Beautiful location and great to celebrate this moment with 600 industry leaders from across the world.
The Leaders Lifetime Achievement Award winner is Jill Ellis. Come on, Jill.
Truly an honour. Just even know the people that have had this award before. I mean, it's quite remarkable, and I obviously want to thank Leaders for this, just a really special night.
The Leaders Sports Awards are in October, part of Leaders Week London, but the time is now to get your entries in and to be in with a chance of lifting a prestigious Leaders Sports Award at the Natural History Museum later this year. Company, category and Leaders Under 40 nominations are open until Friday the 31st of March. All the information you'll need is available in our nominations guide. You can download that now and check out all of the categories, plus last year's winners, at leadersinsport.com/LSA.
And one of those Leaders Sports Awards categories is our annual Sponsorship Award, and it's sponsorship to which we turn now on Leaders Live. We're living in an era, as we know, of ever more complicated and multifaceted commercial partnerships between brand and rights holder, deeper, richer partnerships built on shared values, innovative in nature and often focused on more direct and powerful connections with consumers.
Over the next few minutes, we're keen to dig under the bonnet. Do you dig under the bonnet?
I think you do.
We're going to open the bonnet and have a look inside of why sponsorships are successful in 2023, the real reason sponsorship works. And we're hoping to hear a few of the secrets to success in the company of our two expert guests. Delighted to have with us in the studio Lizelle Sitali, Director of Football and Music Partnerships at online travel brand Expedia, partner of Liverpool FC and UEFA.
And on the line from Atlanta, Melissa Duhame, Director of Sports Marketing at Pepsi. Melissa, good to see you, responsible for Pepsi's sponsorships of, amongst other properties, the NFL, NHL and MLB. Great to have you both with us. Plenty to get into here. As we said, we want to really get inside the sponsorship market and hear about how it's really working today. So a few secrets, and we did ask you to do a little bit of homework to bring us a few nuggets that people might not know about. Lizelle, let's start with you, and a general one to kick off. Tell us one thing that you're seeing in the sponsorship market that's working very well right now, and maybe something that isn't working quite as well.
I think it's definitely right holders moving away from being sort of set in stone of selling you off-the-shelf solutions. So before, where there was a sort of very transactional, very focused relationship of this is what we sell, this is all we have, and you take the whole package or you leave it. There's now a more sort of co-creation to actually unlocking assets that have real value for growing both partners coming around the table. So that for me is a real plus.
Mm-hmm. And what about the downside? What's not working well?
What's not working well? I think ultimately that final decisions are still being driven by the money that's handed over at the beginning of opening a deal versus thinking about at where the growth of partnering together could take you. So I think we still need to get beyond just looking at the envelope figure.
Melissa, same questions to you. Give us your good bit and your not so good bit in the market as you see it at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with everything, you know, as far as the transactional piece. And I know that we've been able to really form relationships with key assets that we know are going to drive our business. And, you know, that's really key to it. There's really no point in signing these partnerships if it's not going to grow our business. And there are certain assets that we know that work harder for us. And so I agree that we've been able to really tailor some of those partnerships. You know, and the piece on the sticker price as well, I think we've seen, you know, before COVID, there was you know, a lot where the values were just getting so high, it was almost impossible to do sponsorships. And then during COVID, I think we actually had the ability to right size, you know, and teams and league partners had to realize that, you know, without fans going to stadium, how are we interacting with fans in a different way? And they had to create new assets. And I think that really gave us a chance to right size some of our deals. And now we're seeing that growth trend again. As we come out of COVID, you know, we see the sticker prices are going up again on our end, and, you know, competition is real in our category. And, you know, it's been interesting to see that, you know, teams will actually draw a line in the sand and say, you know, hey, this is what we want for that category. And if, you know, you're not willing to give it to us, or your competitor's not willing to give it to us, we'll actually leave that category open, which I think is something unique and different that we haven't seen. And so, you know, there's certainly been a little bit more of a challenge on the negotiation side, which has been interesting. But, you know, as long as teams can deliver the value, I think we're okay with paying that sticker price essentially. But to the point of, you know, it's not just about the partnership, because once you have the partnership, you have to activate it, and you have to spend incremental dollars to do that. And I think, you know, ideally we'd love for teams and partners to look at that holistic picture of, yes, we will pay X amount for those rights, but then we have to pay that much more on top of it.
Do keep your questions coming in on LinkedIn. We have a few that we were unable to put to Simon, I'm afraid, through technical difficulties and time, I'm going to say. But Lizelle and Melissa have said they're happy to answer absolutely anything. So keep them coming in on
Did you
LinkedIn.
say that?
Yeah, you said that.
I did not say
You both signed the piece of paper. I think we are good to go. Keep those questions coming in.
That's right. Read the fine print in those sponsorship deals.
Amazing.
So we mentioned we've got a handful of key areas that we'd like to sort of tackle over the next few minutes. And I suppose the place to start, and Melissa, maybe we come to you first on this because you just touched on it. This you know, key area, obviously, of negotiation and contracting, and what actually goes into doing a deal in 2023, and how that might have changed. In terms of your and Pepsi's approach to sponsorship negotiation, tell us a little bit more about what has changed.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we did just touch on it as far as, you know, our approach, you know, not necessarily the, you know, I think we identify the partners that make sense. And then how we're approaching it is really, you know, trying to get those customized assets that really work for us and drive our business. But then what are the opportunities sort of outside of that, right? And so where can we, you know, it's not necessarily for us about a logo on a scoreboard or, you know, a camera visible signage, because we don't have an awareness problem, but, you know, we want to engage with fans on a deeper level. And so there's really, you know, kind of key areas that we focus on to make sure we're getting the right assets that we're really engaging with fans, and then driving our business on the retail side of things, because that's essentially why we're doing these partnerships.
Lizelle, what about from your point of view? And I'm really interested in this idea of, and people talk about sponsorship innovation a lot in all sorts of ways. Room to innovate within the negotiation. What's your sort of approach to that? And again, is that something that you're seeing more of in your relatively new role at Expedia?
Yeah, no, I think one model we're definitely I've always tried in my career, so to some different degrees of success or not, is kind of building in escalators into deals. I think often when partnership teams come to you, particularly from rights holder side, and I'll mostly focus on European football because this is where I've seen more of this behavior than others, they have obviously huge commercial ambitions because of the expensive nature of the business they run. So they'll often come to you and say, this is the price. And to the point Melissa was saying, they're happy to walk away from it. Sometimes actually being a little bit more creative in how you think about it and say, look, we cannot start at the price maybe you're asking, but maybe another way of looking at it is, can we have sort of a test and learn year? Build that in. It's almost like your right to play. You pay that fee, and then you build in an escalator to say, if we start to see it driving the value for us that we both want to see from this partnership, then we can come back and think about that bigger number that you were talking about originally. So I think it's about being more creative and saying, how do you actually almost have a performance-related type of payment approach? And that's definitely something that European football clubs used to balk at pre-COVID because they could demand any price they want and could squeeze you for it. But now you've started to see a lot of properties actually become more open-minded because it actually helps them sell better. Because what they can then take around is learn from that with us and then take it to someone like a Melissa and say, hey, we did this last time with Expedia, we saw this level of success, and actually we can now say fully that it is worth this price and it has driven X business value and impact. So yeah, that's definitely been a good win that you can see them being more open-minded to.
So negotiation.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting,
Sorry, go on, Melissa.
There too on escalators, because for us, like we will not do escalators in a deal, but to the point of the performance, like we will offer performance bonuses. So, is there a playoff bonus if you make the playoffs year over year? And so we will look at it like that. Or is there an incremental investment, if they do drive our business? So if we're growing sales by X% in the stadium, is there then something that triggers a bonus for them as well? And so, I think that's a great point of being creative in the investment and how we can work around some of those things versus just, as you mentioned before, that initial sticker price.
So negotiation, obviously the start of the process. The second area that we asked you to look at was activation, right? Yeah. The meat of any sponsorship, partnership. And something that actually the general public now kind of anticipates. You see around the Super Bowl and the ad creative and all of that sort of thing. The general public are genuinely now interested in what brands are coming up with. Melissa, first question on this to you. How vital is it to do something different with an activation?
I mean, that's what it is all about, and I think that's what we strive to do. Sports is such a saturated industry, and there's so many great brands that are involved in sports and doing such unique and different things. And that's a goal of ours: is how are we always, at the top of our game, essentially, and doing things that are going to break through the clutter and make sure that we're really standing on top. But at the same time, sort of engaging fans, on a local level as well. And so, we feel like there's just always increased competition, and there's plenty of times where I'll see a campaign come out and be like, oh God, that's so good, and maybe we missed the mark a little bit. And so we're constantly challenging ourselves to do bigger and better things, and to do unique and different things, whether it be with technology, or something like that, just to make sure that we're staying in the forefront of the game for sure.
Same question to you, Lizelli. How important is innovation in how you're activating?
I think innovation doesn't always mean doing something different. I think it's actually about doing something timely and that's contextually relevant. I think often what happens is when you come and you play in a category, particularly like sport or entertainment and music, you want to show up authentically as a fan and to really actually either elevate the experience that people are having or to bring sort of solving a problem that they're having in their consumption of that pastime. So I think sometimes it's better to try and build a connection by being timely and being contextual. Often that does mean that you will naturally land at difference, but I think to go at it saying we just want to do something different for difference sake isn't always the most innovative approach you can take, actually.
I know David's got a question, but I just want to throw in some supportive comments that have been coming through on LinkedIn. Stuart Brown says, great point about co-creation. It's critical to truly effective activation. And he also says that getting optimum impact is about people engagement.
Yes.
Well, maybe building on that co-creation point, agencies and working with agencies is another area that we asked you to have a think about and give us a summation of. And Lizelle, coming to you first on this, do you really see the dynamics between brand and agency in particular changing? How are roles of agencies shifting when it comes to both sponsorship negotiation and brokering and also the activation piece?
Yeah, I think I would say their overall purpose and role hasn't changed overly much, and I think that's because of this way you structure and you sell rights, particularly in categories like European football. But one thing that I think has changed for the better over the years that I've worked in the industry is that there's a much more partner-first approach to working with your agency, and your agency being much more invested in actually helping you build your business through partnerships and sponsorships. Whereas to before, I think we very used to have a very kind of executional instruction relationship. I think now, definitely, at least we benefit hugely at Expedia with working with Octagon, with them being much more focused on helping us grow our overall business and how they can do that effective for us, both from a negotiating, contracting point of view, but most importantly for us, for activating and making sure we turn up in the categories we care about well.
Melissa, I know you spent a good deal of time working agency side. I'm sure you'll have a view on whether agencies know best or brands know best?
Well, I'm not going to answer that question. But yes, I did spend 10 years on the agency side. And so, completely understand the role and the relationship there. And for us, it's a critical piece of how we operate our business on the sports side. We've got a longstanding relationship with Genesco Sports Enterprises. And they really are an extension of my team. And they help us with everything from our player negotiations to team negotiations and then, activation and strategy as a whole. And so, I think you'll see in a lot of instances, where corporations have smaller sports teams. I mean, we have over 100 partnerships on the Pepsi side of things and a team of 7 in total, right? And so there's really not the resources internally. So really being able to develop those relationships with agencies and sort of bring them on as an extension of our team has driven a lot of success for us.
Measurement is a key area, David. It's your favourite area of sponsorship, I know.
Do you know what it is?
Yes.
It absolutely is.
And although, we're interested in the secret stuff underneath sponsorship here, people have for a long time been talking about, sponsorship isn't about eyeballs anymore. It's about something deeper. It's about partnership. Yet it remains important to measure kind of reach, and everyone's still measuring eyeballs, basically. Question to both of you, and Lizelle, will come to you first. What is a kind of unusual metric that you have seen used in sponsorship? Something out of the ordinary that you think has had a big impact?
That has had a big impact. I've seen lots of unusual things that are useless.
Right. Okay.
Impactful.
What's an unusual metric that you've seen will not work at all? Not
work at all. I think one, and this will probably upset a few people, around innovation. And I think the reason for it is that it's such a hard thing to define and for it to genuinely have a standardized, scalable, understandable approach versus maybe the way, and this could be a challenge to how we think about quantifiable metrics, I think, of impact in marketing. But I think innovation is one I've seen tried to be cut so many different ways. And it proves ineffective because you can't have a consistent way of both defining it and then being able to demonstrate its bottom line impact.
Yeah. Melissa, any strange metrics you're tracking?
No, not necessarily strange metrics. I think we're still trying to figure out what the best metrics to track are and the best tools to track those metrics. We look at everything and, I'd love to say it's an exact science and that we come out of all of this saying, wow, look at the results that we've delivered. But, I don't think, we've crack the nut on this either. I think we continuously try, and we've got a number of tools and resources at our disposal to track everything from how many displays did we put up in stores around a certain sport, to purchase consideration of fans. Because we're a sponsor of this team, are you more likely to buy our products? And obviously you've got the QI media value, and what does that actually deliver? Yes, everyone's seeing our brand when they're watching sports on TV, but does that translate into I'm going to run to the store and go buy some Pepsi? We love to say that it does, and we're trying to find ways to track that. And is it because you saw our logo on TV, or is it because you saw our cups in stadium? Like, what was that driving factor? And so I think just working through the science of it all and figuring out what are the right tools to actually get us to that answer, to say, like, wow, we really did make an impact, because we really can show a direct correlation between this activation and then our sales number lift in that market. So it's a constant evolution for us, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I want to stick with measurement and ask you a question that I want the truth about, please. And that is, you're obviously both working at organisations that are in very competitive marketplaces. I think I'm obliged to spit on the floor when I say Coca-Cola and Booking.com, big competitors in your respective spaces. How do you track their activity? Like, how much focus do you put on what your competitors are doing in their marketing? Melissa, maybe we'll come to you first.
Yeah, I think for us, where we see the most competition from them is really on the negotiation side of things. Generally speaking, if a team is not Pepsi, it's Coke, and vice versa. And we talked about sort of the negotiating strategy and the challenges about that and the competition in our category and stuff. And that really is real. And I think, what we see in the marketplace is, Coke will come in and they spend a fair amount of dollars on partnerships. But I think where they fall flat to us is on the activation side of things. And so I think that's where we sort of focus and our brands are very different as well. They're very traditional, we're sort of out of the box, culturally relevant, like to be more unapologetic and fun. And so we really focus our activations and campaigns around that. But yeah, I mean, certainly tracking them. But I think when it comes to activating the partnerships, I'm biased as you can imagine, but I do think that we've got them beat there for sure. So really, the competition comes in on the actual sponsorship deals and how many we get versus them.
And Lizelle, I presume you've got some sneaky Google alerts set up for Booking.com?
So much.
Yeah.
I have a whole war room and everything. We just have a whole team dedicated to it. But no, in all seriousness, I think some of the things that we care about are obviously media investment. So, what's our share of voice compared to theirs? Those kind of hygiene factors are the things we worry about. We don't overly obsess on what their strategy is in investing in sports and in music, because it's not this. Their business goals are different to ours. So what we tend to look at is maybe where we can learn things from where they've invested previously in the past that we are maybe interested in, because we can see it's a key passion point that people want to travel for, because that's obviously what our driving ethos is for why we want to partner and sponsor entities. But one thing I think we do have to keep really cognizant of, particularly in Europe, where we're looking to grow with huge ambitions, is actually where are they playing and where are they playing well, and which gaps are they, and how can we go in and truly make a difference. But a lot like what Melissa's referenced with Coca-Cola, we're challenged in the sense that they do go and spend a huge amount of revenue on partnerships. And so we won't always get in the door if someone's only driven by the sticker number. We'll have to be a lot more creative and go around. Yeah.
Whistle-stop tour of the sponsorship market. Just time for one more question for you both around sport versus entertainment, or sport and entertainment. It's probably two brands who are maybe at different stages in that relationship. We'll come to you in a moment, Melissa, for the Pepsi view on how sport and entertainment is merging. But Lizelle, tell us a little bit about what Expedia is doing in the music space and maybe how that's differing to some of your sports activities.
Yeah. Well, I won't give away everything because we know there's always sneaky people watching. But one of the key things we're trying to figure out and think about is how can we actually add to the live music experience? I think one of the gifts after COVID is people appreciate that a lot more. So how can we help get people to concerts better, and how can we, when they're at concerts, particularly when you're looking at categories like festivals, artist tours, how can we actually create and unlock really unique experiences in that space that really excite travelers and delight them through their behavior of transacting with us? And some of the things as well we've done is also testing, working with artists and thinking about how can they help us elevate live game experiences. And we had a really good go of that, sort of borrowing from the really wonderfully tried and tested path that Pepsi have done with the halftime show over the years before they passed over the mic to Apple. On the halftime show we did with the Fiesta Bowl, which is the college football championship. And we had great success with it and really saw what it was able to add to that experience. And what we want to do is say, what learnings can we take from that to build and properly scale partnerships that resonate across our markets from seeing it work.
Melissa, is it sport versus entertainment for Pepsi or sport and entertainment?
Yeah, sport and entertainment for sure. I mean, I think we pride ourselves in sort of being at the forefront of the intersection of sports and music and culture, for that matter. And obviously that stems a lot from the halftime show that we were a part of for 10 years. But, you know, we definitely invest heavily in both, you know, specifically music and then sports separately. But, you know, when you look at sports, like, you know, truly is king too, right? Like if you look at just the passion points, right? And the number of, if you look at the top 100 shows, for example, I think, you know, 90 some of them are sports broadcasts and, you know, licensed merchandise, ticket sales, et cetera. You know, sport is king. And so, you know, we definitely are heavily invested there and focused, but music is certainly a close second for us as well.
I think that's all we've got time for, isn't it, David?
It sure is.
Yes. So it just remains to say thank you very much to Melissa and to Lizelle and to Simon Massie-Taylor for his appearance earlier.
That is our show. We are back on Thursday, the 13th of April. UK Sport Chief Sally Munday will be with us. Until then, bye-bye for now.